Hey guys, Death by Phil here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the tank role and why it's just notoriously unappealing Overwatch 2 and maybe some ways to make it better and more fun to play. So, stick around. First and foremost, in Overwatch 1, we had a 6v6 row queue format for the last 3 years or so for the game, and one of the glaring issues was there just simply wasn't enough tank players in a 6v6 format. Requiring 2 tanks in a game meant that you needed to have at least 33% of your player base playing tank. Well, what happened? And why did we change to 5v5 in Overwatch 2? There just simply wasn't enough tank players. Tank just did not feel as fun and as engaging of a role. And the number one thing is it was unappealing even in Overwatch 1, especially to FPS players, because tanks are the ones that are technically playing a MOBA in Overwatch. You know, Blizzard tends to ignore this portion of the player base and made the game a little bit more FPS-y, and maybe that wasn't the best way to go. That isn't necessarily appealing to FPS players. I'm not saying all folks think the same way and feel the same way, but when you generally play a game like an FPS game, like you want to play a hero that has these fun abilities and they're shooting a gun or shooting something, it seems like the role is more heavily based and geared towards that MOBA mindset over the FPS kind of mindset. I'm not saying it's bad or good to have a more MOBA-like hero. I just feel like it's more fun for most players playing FPS games to have a more FPS-y way to go. And that's kind of funny the way I said that, but that's just the way it is. It's more of a traditional shooter, especially in 5v5, where it was less so in 6v6, but we still had that tank issue because the role just didn't feel as fun to others. Like, most tanks aren't anything like shooters. Like, I think of Reinhardt, he swings a hammer. Winston has this giant taser gun and he like electrocutes people. Doomfist in Overwatch 2, he punches and slams onto folks. Zarya has a beam. And there's so many heroes or so like that. Even though FPS skills are still essential on several tanks, but it's more feeling like a MOBA kind of mindset. So how can we make this role more appealing? Especially so in Overwatch 2, where we have a 5v5 format. Maybe if we fix these things, we can go back to 6v6 and get a greater tank pool, right? The number one thing I think of is the mindset. Our mindset as gamers, right? I said we're playing a more FPS traditional shooter in 5v5. If we go back to 6v6, like the whole mindset there is, how are we going to make this game more fun for tanks? And I think if you give tanks abilities that make them more flexible, that give them more FPS like primary fires or maybe a secondary fire, that it's just an additional skill. I made a video about Reinhardt, and Reinhardt just has this hammer that he swings. Well, why not give him more utility in his fire strike? Something that allows him to do more range damage. Something of that format, or put more range onto Reinhardt's hammer so he could hit it in a longer range instead of having to be so up close and in your face as a tank. Something that allows these heroes to do more FPS-like abilities instead of just MOBA-like abilities. And not all tank heroes are like that. But the other thing I would say is, if you're in 5v5 and even in 6v6, it almost feels like you're relying on your tanks every single game to do all the work, take all the damage, create space, and then they're just blamed. So we have that whole mental aspect there of, I could be doing insanely well on tank, but I'm not getting enough help from my DPS or supports, and because of it, I feel bad and I'm taking the brunt of basically the blame as to why we lost. GG tank diff. I think a number one thing that's a super easy fix without having to balance anything or break the game or require extra development is some sort of feedback score system for tanks. Simply for surviving and tanking, I think would be huge. It's one of the easiest things to add without breaking the game. It doesn't require any sort of balancing, any sort of tweaks. It's just like a different statistical score. And yes, first thing we would say is stats don't mean everything in Overwatch. Completely agree. But you need something to kind of motivate tanks to continue playing the game, right? Why not give them some sort of feedback score? We have the damage mitigation stat. That doesn't really mean so much, but why not like maybe a damage taken stat for tanks? This tank took X amount of damage, or you know, another stat is how much damage was provided to the tank, right? So what DPS did the most damage to the tank, and they could be like, well, the DPS is saying, oh, I have 20k damage and you on tank have 10k, you're trash. Well, if there was another stat and it could show like, well, you did X amount of damage to a tank, like you're just shooting a Roadhog who has a self heal with his take a breather and is just getting pumped heals by the supports, like something that shows like the tank did XYZ, or you did XYZ to the tank. I think of maybe even a stat talking about how much heals you provided to the tank. So oftentimes, even from a support's perspective, you could say, you know, I'm not getting enough heals as a tank player, and the support's like, I'm pumping you with heals. It would show the amount of heals that individual support player provided to that tank. There's also feedback score system for surviving and tanking, would show like that damage taken stat. And I like I said, it should be for all roles, but it would be pretty cool to show how much damage the tank specifically took. They're trying to create space and do things, and it could be like, well, they took a lot of damage. Other things you could say is like, well, our tank is just feeding. The damage stats across the board given to all rows would show what DPS are shooting the tank, you know, taking like, so to speak, unnecessary damage or needless damage and soaking all the heals up. We could use those stats for sure to show the aspect of the game, what's going on, what your tank is doing, how much heals the supports are providing to the tank, how much damage other folks are taking who maybe need some more help. And you could help that person out or work on getting a better hero comp because they're taking too much damage. The other thing is, if 5v5 is gonna stay, most Overwatch 1 tanks, original tanks, like I said, Reinhardt, need to be completely reworked. I think, honestly, if we went back to 6v6, the tank format, the way it is today, is a lot better than what it was in Overwatch 1. And actually, the reworks they did for 5v5 make more sense. And I think, all in all, makes the tank role a little bit more fun if there were two tanks that did exist. But most of the Overwatch 1 tanks were designed with another tank in mind. They were an off tank or a main tank. And I think that's also one of the main issues as to why so many tanks are counterable today, is that there's tanks that existed from Overwatch 1 that didn't really get much changes or reworks. And they really need it if they're going to stay in 5v5 today. So if that's the case, they need something changed. But if we're going to go back to 6v6, I think we're in a better state today than we were in Overwatch 1 with two tanks in mind. Taking away all these additional shields and the shield HP has been tremendous for the tank role. Obviously, HPs would have to come down if we went back to 6v6. But this is talking about what can make Overwatch 1 tanks, I mean, you know, Overwatch and Overwatch 2 and Overwatch 1 tanks better in the current status of format of 5v5. So I think we need to rework some of the older tanks, like Reinhardt especially, give them different abilities, more damage. Another thing is, when I'm thinking of playing Overwatch, right, and I'm a hit scan main on DPS, but I'm primarily a support main. When I'm playing Overwatch and I'm playing DPS and I'm playing Cass, and I hit these headshots, the sound of just hitting those headshots feel amazing. Same thing if I'm playing like Widowmaker or Soldier 76. Yes, there's headshot damage for some of the heroes on tank, like Orisa shooting the head with her primary fire will make the same kind of ding, 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 ding sound. But those sounds alone, that mental aspect of hearing these positive sounds, these things that just sound good, it makes you feel better. And I think we need to move that over and transfer that over to the tank role, right? Like I said, Orisa shooting her primary fire and getting headshots, that sounds amazing, right? Zarya's bubble getting shot and taking damage. It has a nice kind of sound when your charge is going up. So taking damage feels fun. You're playing tank. The majority of what you're doing is you're taking the brunt force of the enemy team. You're taking a lot of the damage. You're trying to create space. It just sounds better. Things I could think of would be like, you know, moving that kind of great sounds over to like shield damage, or when Sigma is using his what do we call it? I forget his ability name. When he's sucking the damage, make it have like a cooler, louder, more distinct sound to it. When D.Va's using her defense matrix, same thing. Kind of like, I like the sounds, but make it more like, just make it more pronounced. Make it sound better. Make it have some sort of mental impact on us that, hey, I'm doing something on tank. This I think will mentally make us feel like we're doing more on tank, we're having more of an impact, and just make the game more fun. And when you shoot a shield, it doesn't really make anything positive in the sound. Rein's shield or Sig's shield taking damage, or Ramatra's shield taking damage would just sound like better if it had some sort of different, higher pitched noise when the damage is taken. Final thing I will say is countering in 5v5 is a huge issue. How do we deal with countering on tank? Because there's only one tank now, and it feels like when you go into a team fight and you win that team fight on tank, let's say you're on D.Va, the enemy tank comes out the next fight in most cases and they're running Zarya. So now you're hard countered, you can't have fun on D.Va anymore. And you could try and make it work and deal with your counter and play into it, and that's a whole nother aspect of the game that I could talk about in a completely other video about countering and how to deal with that and get better on your hero to deal with hard counters. But all in all, it's generally a big issue with countering in 5v5 and having one tank. And how do you make that better? Well, maybe provide more flexibility to your tank abilities. And I could think of like Orisa. And this is just hypothetically speaking. I'm playing Orisa, or I'm playing Reinhardt, right? Let's move to Reinhardt. I'm playing Reinhardt. I'm a very immobile tank. I just have a shield, and I move around very slow when it's up. Well, I also have a charge. Well, when I use that charge, I only go in one direction. I can't go up in the air. I can't go sideways. I can't get to other points of the ground to deal with somebody who's maybe diving my backline. How can I get to them quickly? Can I dash backwards? Can I dash forwards, upwards, sideways? Give more flexibility to tank roles, to tank heroes. And this is all hypothetically thinking, is like, why can't Rein jump up in the air, right? Why can't Rein charge to the left or right? Why does Rein get stunned, hindered, or slept when he charges? Things like that you got to think of, like when you're doing that mobile kind of flexibility aspect of the game. One hero like Maga, who can't be stunned or hindered or slept while he's charging, should transfer over to another one who has a similar ability like Reinhardt. So you need to be rewarded with something in some way and have some sort of flexibility to deal with the countering issues in 5v5. And as long as 5v5 role queue is around, this will always be an issue. We need to make the game more fun for tanks. I think once we make it more fun for tanks and we do a lot of these things that are just thoughts here, it would make the tank role feel fun. And it will make me want to play tank. It'll make others want to play tank more. Like, you got to reward them in some way. Another way could be incentivizing the tank role, of giving them more XP for playing tank, like significantly more XP than what they do today if you queue up for tank towards your battle pass. Maybe there's tank rewards in the battle pass for you playing tank, and let it be free rewards. Not like, oh, I have to buy the premium battle pass to get these tank rewards. Free rewards. You do this and you can get a DPS skin or support skin, right? Not a tank skin, so to speak. There will be some, but you playing tank, and specifically playing tank in competitive, rewards DPS hero skins, support skins, so that if you're a support player or DPS player, you're thinking, well, I'm going to play tank this season, at least a little bit, to increase the tank player base, because I want those reward skins for playing competitive tank. And I think incentivizing us and making it better for players as a whole to say, I want to play tank. It's more fun. I get more rewards. I feel better when I'm playing tank. I have a feedback score system. It's more appealing. It's probably why Doomfist is one of the most played tanks, especially in higher elos, is that he used to be a DPS before, and he's very fun to play when you do play him and play him well. He was designed to be a DPS hero, and he moved over to tank, and they changed his kit quite a bit. But he still has that whole mindset of he was a DPS hero. And that's why I think a lot of people do play Doomfist in higher elo, is that it was fun to play him in Overwatch 1 on DPS, but now he's a tank, so now I'm a tank main. So thinking of that way and that concept, I think will make the game significantly better for tank players and resolve the majority of the issues. So if you haven't already, make sure to like this video. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Do you agree or disagree? What are some takes you have to make Overwatch more fun for tanks and make the role more appealing? And also share this with a friend. Let them check it out and maybe they could give some input. The last thing is subscribe to my YouTube channel. It really does mean a lot to me and it makes me want to keep making content like this and stay motivated to keep doing it. And as always, happy gaming.